Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. The XDefiant Open Beta is now here. It's only live for a couple of days today until the 23rd is when you're going to be able to jump in and actually play. But with that being said, now that it's open and available for everyone to play, I wanted to break down the best settings you want to be using in all the various categories, whether it's graphics, controller, audio, you name it, we're gonna be covering it all here. So I'm on PC recording this, meaning that I'm gonna have the full list of options and settings available here. Obviously, if you're on console, you're gonna be limited in other regards, but we'll be covering everything that's available on any platform here, right? So we start first with gameplay and UI. You're gonna notice that pretty much right away, your gameplay input here is gonna be locked if you're playing on, PC specifically here, where you can constantly change, but even on console, you could run into this as well. It's gonna be locked to mouse and keyboard. It's been like this since the open beta launched. However, this doesn't mean you're locked to playing mouse and keyboard. I've been playing controller just fine, even though it says this. Now, field of view is something totally subjective. I like playing on the largest field of view because you're able to see a little bit more. Sometimes it can help that feel with, visual recoil, and I like that 120 angle. For most players, I think the sweet spot's probably going to be around 100 or so, but adjust that as needed. There's no true best option for that. ADS field of view I keep as consistent because this is going to correlate directly to your actual field of view. So if you have this on independent, if you're playing on 120 FOV, if you zoom in with a red dot, it's going to zoom in super far. Whereas with consistent, it's not going to be nearly as zoomed in. Consistent relies on your field of view. Independent is going to always zoom into a certain amount. I like having it as consistent. You have that wider screen then still while you are ADSing. I keep my ADS on hold. That's more of a preference thing. Low transition on the ADS sensitivity for the low zoom, you have between instant, blend, and then after ADS. The instance, what's going to feel the most natural in most cases. This is basically what's going to activate your left to right sway. If you have a lower ADS sense than you do standard sensitivity, which we'll get to here in a bit, it'll instantly activate right as you go to aim down your sights. Meleeing during an ADS, you never know who's gonna pop into your view while you're holding an angle or something, so I feel like it's nice to be able to have that as an option there. If you want to cancel your reload in this game, yes, Call of Duty, you can in fact still cancel reloads. It's a thing. You can do that by aiming there. There's also various other ways to do it, which we'll get to here as well. Crouch behaviors on toggle. I just feel like that's pretty easy. Sprint behavior, tap. That way you don't have to like destroy your complete, thumbstick there or your shift button to make that a little bit easier. Sprinting, interrupt, reload. Again, just another way to reload cancel here. I feel like that's a phenomenal thing to have because you never know when you need to stop that full on reload. Slide behavior, you definitely want to have on tap. This is going to make your movement just even more seamless. You can very easily tether together sliding and sprinting, jumping into a slide or whatever the case may be. You can really tether good movement mechanics together well if you have this on tap. You do not want that on hold. I don't like the weapon auto reloading or auto switching for me. Again, I want to be in complete control, so I have these on no, but this is more so preference based. Yet again, you could definitely turn those around if you wanted to. I also don't like the auto grab ledge either, or the walk behavior. Yes is going to move at walk speed constantly, and you'll have to then walk again to return to full sprint. I'm not a big fan of that, or full speed rather. HUD limits, that's totally up to you. And then there's actually the UI settings in here as well. So if you want to see your various challenge notifications pop up, you can have those on. You can also have your distance units however you want as well. And now, if you're playing on PC, you can have some of these things show up, and it's nice to have them if you care about them. I like seeing what my FPS is in the top left, mainly to see if I'm getting like stutters or something, or if it's the server that might feel laggy at any given point in time. So it's just nice to have that info on there. Ping, you can also turn on there if you want. Same deal with your network performance with the packet loss latency. If you want to see that stuff showing up, you can turn that on. Now, when you're actually shooting at enemies, you can see the damage numbers, and then also the health bars. I feel like both of those are pretty vital pieces of information to see on a screen, so I would highly recommend turning those on. Minimap rotation I keep not locked. That way I'm always looking in front of me there. I just feel like it's easier to read with that. Now, keyboard and mouse here is pretty much all preference based. There's no real best options here, whereas controller, there are certain things you want to have on, but keyboard and mouse is all about what is comfortable to you with your sensitivity and everything there. I would always recommend having your lower zoom sense a little bit lower than your normal sense, just so you can be a bit more accurate. But other than that, I haven't even played and set up keyboard and mouse too much here because this is all just preference based. Use the keybinds that you're comfortable with. Like I said, no real best settings for that. Controller, on the other hand, there are several things you can do. For me, with how I play on my SCUF controller, I like having what is essentially tactical. Brawler is going to be the preset for that, so that my right stick is the crouch and also my slide. I just feel like it's super easy to tether movement with my right stick there. And then circle, I have a paddle on the back of my controller. I can just tap that to melee. It makes things nice and easy. But gamepad presets, the button presets here are going to be largely preference based on what you're comfortable with. Stick layout, I always leave on default. Now, aim assist only has two options here, standard or disabled. If you're playing on controller, you probably don't want to have this disabled. Keeping it on is going to be where you want to have that. Now, as far as the strength goes, it caps out at 0 here. You can only lower it. I wouldn't recommend doing that. Aim assist in this game definitely does feel wonky. Sometimes it feels like it's very strong. Other times it feels like it's not there at all. So leaving this as default is going to make it the most consistent, but keep in mind, it's not something that's perfect by any means. Aim response curve type, I like on linear. Reverse S curve would be the equivalent of dynamic in Call of Duty as well, but for what it's worth, between standard linear and reverse S curve, there is some preference in the feel to it. Linear is going to be the most one-to-one of what you're doing on your thumbstick as to what you're seeing on screen. But between reverse S curve and linear, I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer there. Also, quick reminder, as we are breaking down all the settings here, if you guys are new to the channel and you like what you see, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Join us ultimately on the road to 1 million subs. And if you guys enjoy the video, if you find it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it as well. Would be seriously appreciated. Now, low zoom and high zoom. High zoom obviously is the 7 times, 8 times, 9 times, so on and so forth. Low zoom is like your red dots, your ACOGs and whatnot. I would definitely recommend dropping this down some. You don't have to go to a specific value. Some of it's going to depend more on your overall sensitivity, but having this around, a little bit tweaked down from what your standard going to be playing on just means that you're going to be a little bit more accurate when you ADS. You don't want to have this too low so that you can't keep up with fast moving targets. You obviously don't want it being too high, like even 1 sometimes can be too high for staying on target with distance targets, right? So definitely adjust that as needed, but I would recommend lowering that some. I don't invert anything here. And then as far as my actual sensitivity goes, you can go all the way up to 100 in this, right? But I feel like having somewhere around the medium is a solid. So 30, 40, 50, somewhere in between that mark is going to be pretty solid. Then I also like to stagger mine. Vertical sensitivity, you don't have to move as much, so I do keep that a little bit lower than my horizontal, which obviously you want to have fast enough to react in a close range fight, but not too fast to potentially hip fire somebody or stay on target if you need to track them otherwise. So I'm sticking at a 37, 33, but you can definitely adjust that in any direction if you're more comfortable in a higher or a lower sense. And then acceleration speed I keep on 1. Dead zone is going to be completely specific to your controller. Please don't say what's the best dead zone, because there is no answer. I might have less stick drift than you might have less stick drift than me. So this is entirely dependent on how much stick drift your controller has. Mine works at 8, but you might need to adjust that more or less depending on your controller. Then I wouldn't recommend vibration on either, just because it's going to be more annoying to stay on target if your controller is sitting there shaking and you're trying to be super accurate. You don't want that on. Now for audio settings here, there's a lot to go through. One thing I want to point out is that even though I have music on 0, because there's nothing in game that music is going to give you information for, even though I have it on 0, I'm constantly still hearing a bunch of music play at random points in game. So that's a little bit annoying, but you don't need music to give you vital gameplay information. Dialogue can be important for certain things, so I keep that at about a 40. Obviously, these certain exact values are going to be different probably depending on your level of volume on your computer or on your console, right? But for me, these are the things that you want to focus on the most, being SFX. This is going to be gunfire, footstep audio, all sorts of stuff like that. You want to have this be the loudest compared to dialogue and music. So definitely make sure you keep that higher than the others. Then UI is just your menu stuff, like the little tabbing going through. That doesn't really matter too much. You can have that on or off, doesn't really matter. But dialogue lower than SFX, and SFX higher than pretty much everything else, right? Mute audio and minimize doesn't really matter. If you want voice chat on, you could have it on. If you don't want it on, you can turn it off. All that stuff is just dependent on whether or not you want that experience. Then we get into the video and graphics, and obviously a lot of this depends on your PC, right? So certain things are not going to be able to run smoothly for you versus, somebody else. My computer, super overkill. I got a 7950X in here, 4090, 64 gigs of DDR5. It's a dedicated gaming computer. Like I said, super overkill. So I'm able to play with pretty much all maxed out settings. If you have a different computer, you might not have that. So as we get into that, just keep in mind. Now, unfortunately, my game bugs out whenever I go into full screen, so I have to play on full screen windowed. But if you can play on full screen, that's always going to be the smoothest experience. Obviously, your resolution and frame rate depend on your monitor. Reduced latency, that's always going to be solid. It may cause a lower frame rate, but if you can reduce the latency, reduce that input lag, that's always going to be nice. And then low latency is just going to be dependent on your computer here. Obviously, it does depend a bit on what CPU and what GPU you have, but pretty much always having it enabled at the least is going to be solid because it's going to boost performance in your game. Brightness and contrast is going to be more so dependent on your monitor and how bright you want it to be. We get into the actual settings here. I've been playing with DX12 off. You could have this on though if you want the changes that come with that, but that's not a huge deal, at least in my opinion. Graphics quality is going to be custom here. Unless you want it to be set standard for certain things, I'd always have it on custom. VSync, I don't want on ever, because with it on, you're going to have basically more input lag. You guys can see behind the face cam here, if I go ahead and I hide this momentarily, it says if you're experiencing input lag, consider turning this off. There will be screen tearing in certain cases, but you rather have more consistent input rather than having that lag and having that stutter with VSync on. So you definitely want that off. Frame rate limit you could have on or off. You can set that custom if you want. Shadows aren't going to be the biggest deal, so you don't have to have those turned all the way up. Same deal with spot shadows and spot shadow resolution. That's not going to be a huge deal there regardless. Same deal with contact shadows. There's a lot going on with the shadows here. You don't need those turned up a ton just because it's just a shadow. It's going to be visible in medium or high res, right? Resolution scale, I do keep on 100 though. Sharpening, for me, 7 looks good. You could also adjust that a little bit more if you want a sharper or a less sharper image. Particle details, I keep on ultra because it's not affecting my frames too much, but it's basically just the amount of particles that are present for explosions and gunfire and stuff like that. So the lower you have this, the less that you'll actually notice on screen. Now, fog, the quality seems to differ for me personally. Even though I have it on ultra, it still in some cases doesn't look as good, but then in other cases it looks fine. So I don't feel like this is a super consistent one, but really if you're looking for high FPS here, I'd pretty much be changing everything to medium essentially, right? For instance, reflection quality, not going to be a huge necessary thing you have to see. Medium is going to work fine. Local reflection quality you could also turn down to medium as well. If you want the grass and the vegetation to look nice, obviously you can turn that up, but it's not going to be a huge deal either. Medium is going to work just fine. Ambient occlusion here, this is going to be shadowing from lights and various things. If you want the world to look nice, obviously turn it higher, but that's going to affect your frames. Once more, medium would work just fine. Object detail, you can adjust this as needed. 60 is the default here, and it seems to look visually fine for me. Then extra streaming distance, longer object streaming distance, it basically just uses more memory. So depending on your RAM limit and your memory limit here, you might want to turn that down or up depending on your capability there. Lens flare, I do not want on. You definitely want to turn this one off because it's just going to make your visibility easier. If you have this on, you could get blinded or have that flare come up in certain scenarios where it makes it harder to spot enemies, so you don't want to have that on. Water quality, again, you can have on medium just for the frames there. I like the visuals of it on high personally. And then finally, we've got the terrain quality, just the quality of the world again for frames. Medium is probably going to be fine. Also, if you really don't care about the looks of the game and you just want FPS, you could go all the way low on everything, but I imagine you probably want the game to look good too, so medium I feel like is the best recommended for all of this stuff. If you got the PC to handle it, you might as well go to high. Now for language and accessibility stuff, this is mostly going to be preference based. You can have various different colorblind modes if you need that. Bright flashbang, you could have this bright or dark. The dark is honestly kind of cool. I haven't run into too many flashes yet, but it's a cool setting to have. The other stuff is really not all that important. Then when it comes to account and network, you don't have much going on here. With crossplay right now, I'd recommend probably having this on for the beta just so you can find matches seamlessly and always have that good connection. And then same input and matchmaking, not a thing right now in the beta, so you don't have to worry about that. And that being said, those are the best settings for XDefiant right now. Regardless of what platform you're on, we should have hit all bases here. So adjust as needed for your preference. But other than that, definitely look out for a few things here and there. Hopefully this video helped you out though. If it did, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you guys are new here, you want to stay up to date with all things going on, feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.